On today's episode of the DeRaud-Messinger Show, we're previewing and predicting Wyoming versus number 4 Texas. Dylan, when was the last time a fan could say that? I think the year was 2009, top 4
Yeah,
Texas.
yeah.
Things have changed seemingly for the Longhorns over time. Pressure creates diamonds or whatever the saying is, Dylan. And diamonds were had in Alabama,
Yeah.
but this is a new week. Sarkisian and the boys would be the same sayings is what they're throwing out as I am. Definitely, they treat every week like it's a championship week. In Wyoming, Dylan, avoiding your jokes is no different. Game info for you guys just to make sure we're making it to the right stadium yet again. Do not travel to Laramie. You will have a long
Heard it's
drive.
great this time of year, though. It's
We
great.
heard it's great this time of year. We were doing a lot of research on the town for some reason, and
Yeah.
just not this year, guys. Not this year. Maybe in the future. I don't know when, but maybe. The game will be Saturday, September 16th at 7 p.m. Central Time at Darrell K. Royal Texas Memorial Stadium in Austin, Texas. The details have not changed. It's televised on Longhorn Network. In Texas, last time I checked, was favored by 29 points. Now, Dylan, scouting report. How are you feeling about the Wyoming defense in this game?
Oof. There's a lot. There's a lot to look at there. The one that stands out the most is their secondary. They let up 338 passing yards to Texas Tech in the game that they won in overtime, I believe 35-33. And then they followed that up against Portland State with allowing 254 pass yards. But the good news for them is they've had two interceptions, one from each of those games. Defensive back Rook Brown from Salado, Devon, Texas. If I'm
Salado.
pronouncing that correctly,
Oh,
Salado, Texas. Still a Texas boy though, but he can't avoid my mispronunciations. He has 13 tackles and the interception in that Texas Tech game, and then they've got safety Wyatt Eckler that had 14 total tackles and one interception against Portland State. But then when you do a deep dive into their secondary, none of them are over 5'11. So not a big group back there, especially in today's kind of age of football. It's nice to have a 6'1", 6'2" defensive back that you could deploy against a taller receiver, like an AD Mitchell or even a Worthy. They just don't have that, nor are these guys that are like, we're looking at stars when they're being recruited. It's not five-star cornerbacks or anything like. And this is a very talented Texas receiving core. So this is the big group to kind of watch because they can easily get gashed in this one, and just viewers will be able to kind of have a field day out there being able to throw the long ball. Then when you look at their front seven, their leading tackler, linebacker Shea Sui Anoa, 6'3", 231-pound junior from Houston, Texas, Devon. He's got 16 total tackles, which leads the team, one sack and one pass deflection or pass breakup. So he's the one to watch on the defensive end. And then you've got the big boy at defensive tackle, Jordan Bertignole. Or
we're
Bertignole.
testing his
Just gonna keep
pronunciations
just gonna
today.
keep going everywhere we can. 6'4", 290 pounds. He's got 13 total tackles and one sack. They like to be big up front with this Wyoming team, especially with their defensive ends as well, both standing about 6'4". But the real question is, will they be able to get by this offensive line of Texas? Based off
Yeah.
what I saw, they've had to use a lot of design blitzes in order to get to, for example, against Texas Tech, they had to use a lot of design blitzes with their linebackers to get pressure. So look for that in this matchup, especially with how they work their linebackers into their rush packages, because they're not going to be able to kind of get four-man pressures on Texas unless the offensive linemen for Texas ate a lot of for breakfast and are moving really slow.
And they were coached by former Texas assistant Oscar Giles at a defensive front. And I know they've been good against the run, Dylan. The head coach
Mm,
Craig Bull mentioned that, but yeah,
yeah.
in the passing game, definitely have some things to show against a stout offensive line for the Longhorns. Good to take on offense here now.
Go for it.
All right, all right, all right. So, of course, this Mountain West team, that's the conference we're dealing with here, is 2-0. And as Dylan mentioned, they did have a 2 overtime win over Texas Tech. That was a great game. I don't know if y'all were watching at home, but if not, I
Mm.
recommend hitting up the DVR and checking it out. But for Wyoming at quarterback, The graduate student, Andrew Peasley, is the guy. Their coach said that his game last weekend might have been his best as a Cowboy, Dylan. So Texas is at least getting him on the hot streak, thankfully for Longhorns fans, of course. But he is a dual-threat quarterback, not with Jalen Milroe-esque speed. So that might bode well for the Longhorns, given the fact that they just played somebody that could, run a 4-4 at quarterback, basically.
Yeah.
So theoretically, easier to cover in that regard. He finished last season with just over 1,500 passing yards. And the key stat here was 10 touchdowns to 9 interceptions. He's been more efficient so far this season. But if, history replays itself here, it can be a little inconsistent with the ratios there. So that's something to watch out for in that Texas secondary. See if they can take advantage of that. And then at running back, they have Sam Scott, who made the most of his opportunities so far this season, averaging 6.3 yards per carry. But someone I covered in high school, Dylan, DQ James out of Lancaster, has been given carries as well. I believe actually has more carries so far this season than Scott does. Maybe they're trying to give him a little bit of the feed, or maybe Scott is just, banged up after that double overtime win against Tech. But Scott is the guy to watch out for. And then at receiver, we got some interesting names here as well, Dylan. Junior Ayer Asante and graduate student Wyatt Wieland are both guys to watch out for. And then, as Dylan and I were talking about, you got the Oklahoma Sooners prototype tight end on the Wyoming Cowboys, a 6'5" sophomore, John Michael Geilenborg. Now, that sounds like a name that's ready to crush some skulls and catch some touchdown passes. So he's a big body target to watch out for. The offensive line is led by 6'7" graduate student Frank Crum, who was, I believe, on the second team. I could be wrong, but second team Mountain West Conference last season. And is the leader, of course, like I said, of that line. Now, Dylan, we got to mention the kicker. John Hoyland, last weekend, we're bringing in kickers. He hit a 56-yard field goal, which is quite impressive. Now, I must note, for the viewers at home, Wyoming has the highest elevated stadium in Division I football, so there is a little bit of an advantage to be a kicker there versus anywhere else, Dylan. But if he's hitting 56 yards in Wyoming, I'd like to say he could hit a 50 in Austin, but I guess we'll have to see. And then just a note about the coach, Dylan, Craig Bohl. He won 3 titles at North Dakota State. Throwback there. He won 2 titles as an assistant coach at Nebraska back in the day. So there is some, some heavy experience coaching there, and he's done a pretty good job so far this season. But Dylan, now that we've talked about offense and defense, who are your X factors?
Yeah, the X factors for me on the Wyoming side, it's going to be that pass rush. As I hinted at earlier with those defensive ends, it's going to fall a lot on their 6'3" defensive end, Sebastian Harsh, and then 6'4", 230-pound Devon Harris. Devon, both of them have sacks this year, but it's going to be a struggle, especially just trying to get 2 Ewers in this one with that offensive line of Texas that is playing a lot better. And you saw that in the second half and when they were starting to wear down that Alabama front. So it's going to be a lot on them if they want to give this team a chance, because as I said earlier, that secondary, that's kind of their weak point. So the best defense if your secondary isn't doing well is to get that pressure and have instances where if they send a 4-man rush, they can still get pressure without having to utilize their linebackers in those blitz packages. So those are the 2 guys that I look at just falling along that defensive line. They're going to have their work cut out for them in this one. And then with Texas, Devon, simple fact is they have more talent than the Wyoming team. I don't think I'm, busting any hairs here. So I think that's a pretty factual statement. So it's going to come down to how they're feeling after this Alabama game. Are they going to take Wyoming seriously? That's something that I'm sure Tech didn't do until maybe the fourth quarter of their game, because they were up 17-3 in the first quarter. They let off the brakes or let off the gas a little bit, and Wyoming came raring right back. So that's something to look out for if you're Texas. Again, execute the way they're supposed to. I know they'll have a solid game plan going into this. They're well coached. So it really just comes down to Texas taking this seriously and not taking plays off.
Yeah, I mean, my X factor, literally, I just put Longhorns mentality in this one, Dylan. If they come in, I was joking about it, I think, in the reaction video. If they're coming in and still kind of drinking on that champagne the night before, it might be a long night game for them in Austin. But really, this is a potential trap game, so it is just staying motivated. Even keel, as I talked about earlier. All the players and Sark has been talking about they practice every week like it's a championship week. Well, here's the test. The great teams of the past, Dylan, we have to go back quite a few years in the example of Texas. If we want to use Alabama as an example, they crush the opponent every week, regardless of their skill level, their talent level. This is a week to show that this is a different team, and there's no let off on that gas pedal. To mention Sark's little saying there, Dylan. But specific groups to watch: the Texas running backs. Wyoming has a good front against the run so far this season. Texas running backs haven't been the greatest. They did what they needed to do against Alabama, Dylan, but of course it's Alabama. Nothing too crazy ended up happening. You had a Jonathan Brooks 5-yard touchdown rush towards the end of the game that pretty much sealed it toward the end. Not quite, but definitely gave Texas the little boost they needed. But other than that, there's some small flashes, Dylan, but nothing really too much going on there. So can the running backs feast before the Big 12 opener? To be determined. Yet again, Wyoming has shown that they can do otherwise and prevent that. And then defensively, watch the edge positions and outside linebackers, for the Longhorns. As I mentioned, Peasley likes to run and is a bit of a dual threat quarterback. Last weekend against Alabama, Texas lost contain at times. They're going to have to keep contain. And yet again, Dylan was talking about talent level. No disrespect, Texas athletically should have the advantage there. If not, something is happening. So guys like Anthony Hill, if he's playing a similar sort of role that he did last weekend, will have plenty of opportunities to both shadow the quarterback and also get to him. But yet again, it was a whole defensive performance all around last weekend. And those are my X factors. Now, Dylan, of course, danger level. I'm kind of curious about this one. How are you feeling?
Yeah, I have danger level of 1. As you talked about earlier, and I mentioned with Texas Tech, it really Wyoming has more of a name now, and maybe Longhorns fans are tuning in a little bit more on Wyoming because they beat Texas Tech. If that did not happen, this would just be another team from out of conference that a lot of teams will put in their first 3 games to kind of get ready for the Big 12 opener, right? So it's definitely boosted by them winning against Texas Tech. But again, this Texas team is just so incredibly talented. You saw them beat Alabama. Texas has now shown that they are a college football playoff contender, right? And I expect them to act like that in this one. And if they are a contender in the college football playoff, then I don't see Wyoming winning this game. So that's why I have it at a 1.
Yeah, I wanted to give it a 1, Dylan, too, but yet again, I was talking about this Champaign earlier. I bumped it up to a 2 just because it is a potential trap game. Do I think that will happen? No, but there is some level of danger. I think they're better than the Rice team, Dylan, but Rice beat Houston, what was that, last weekend or the weekend before? So
That was a close game. That was also a good game.
they were no sleeper, it turns out. But yeah, I also have it as a 2. I did talk about the mentality again, though. You just need to come in ready to run through some walls, crack some skulls. No rhyme intended there, but yeah. And from my count, Dylan, 21 of these Wyoming Cowboys are from the state of Texas. That's a pretty sizable figure, and you can bet your behind, Dylan, that a good number of them had dreams about becoming Texas Longhorns someday, and ultimately did not have their number called in terms of a scholarship offer. And so this will be a bit of a revenge game for those players. Yet again, not all of them are starting, but 21 players on a roster is pretty sizable, so they have a motivation to come out. So I'm going to give it a 2 in the danger level. But Dylan, predictions, how are you feeling?
Yeah, I have Texas winning 40-10. I know you talked about this strong point on defense for Wyoming, and that's going to be against the run. Even if that is the case and we're not seeing the running game of Texas really get going, I still think Texas is going to absolutely gash them in the passing game, especially after what you showed last week. And then when you look at on Wyoming's offense, Devon, I believe they've only attempted about 50 passes this season. Their strong suit, or what they want to win with, is Peasley running the ball. He's had 21 carries total for 111 yards, right? So they are going to want to get Peasley moving, and I don't think you can do this against this linebacking group of Texas, right? We just talked about Anthony Hill. We know they've got Jalen Ford.
Gabenda made some big plays last weekend.
Exactly. So I don't see Peasley being able to get away from these guys, especially when it comes to the linebackers. So if they're leaving a spy on him, I just don't. I see that getting taken away for Wyoming, and so then they're going to have to, lean on Peasley's arm, and we haven't seen a huge sample size of that. We do know their tendencies in the sense of they're not really looking to pass all the time. They want to run the ball, and I don't think they're going to be able to do that against Texas. So that's why I've got Texas winning by 30 points.
Yeah, I got a similar score, Dylan. You're kind of always aiming for my score, I think, secretly deep
Oh, yeah,
down.
sure. You
But
always ask me before you get your answer,
100%.
Though, so.
But Texas,
Yeah.
I have Texas winning 38-10. Yet again, we'll see how this goes. I think that if Wyoming wants to have a chance in this game, especially with that predicated run offense as we were talking about in the dual threat ability of quarterback Andrew Peasley, they're going to want to limit the number of possessions, which could end up, in a close game, Dylan, but also could just end up with Texas scoring less than usual because they have less possessions to operate with. I'm going with the latter there, the less than usual, still going to score their points. 38-10. I think that'd be a decent win for Texas at home. But I had questions, hypothetical questions, life questions to ponder
Yeah.
as we
Yeah.
face this Wyoming game. First of all, a game in Laramie would be beautiful, Dylan. Why can't we have that? But no, jokes aside, can Ewers throw for 300 plus yards and 3 touchdowns? And I put little quotes here, or parentheses. I said, can we get him subbed out of the game? Can Sark do well enough where in the fourth quarter you're not going to need him? If something like that's happening, then you know that the game is going well. Can the running back room run for 130 plus? Last weekend they did not reach that, but yet again, it was against an Alabama team. Wyoming has shown to be no slouch against the run. However, yet again, as we said, there is a talent discrepancy. You would like to see some sort of breakout before they get into conference play. That's to be determined. Are we going to see more of Anthony Hill Jr., Dylan? I mean, I don't know about you, but I was wanting more.
I think he deserves some playing time.
I
I
want
think he
him to be
deserves more
hosting
playing
some
time.
sort of TV show or something. I couldn't get enough
Oh,
of
geez.
Anthony Hill Jr. with I believe, 2 sacks. And yet again, just like a rabid dog that just got let out of the cage by Sark and Coach K. It was beautiful. And how will the Texas offense, or excuse me, how will the Texas defense, you don't want this offensively, how will the Texas defense create turnovers this weekend? Like I said before, Peasley does not have the greatest track record of touchdown-interception ratio. This might be a chance for them to get some of those. And then when Peasley takes it to the edge, like we said, Texas athletically has the advantage. Can they force some fumbles and just big hits and make them scared to go out of the pocket? Because I would be against that linebacker front that we talked about.
Yeah.
But more importantly than our predictions, leave us your score predictions down below. Don't forget, this is our Longhorns coverage, part of HornSports.com. Check us out at HornSports.com for all the latest in Texas news. Thank you and have a great rest of your day.